about spreadsheets. And so our goal here is going to be to just make a table of calculated numbers and then to make that table look nice. So one of the nice features of spreadsheets I want to show you is that if we enter two numbers in a row like this, spreadsheets can generally tell what you're trying to do. And so I just have 1, 2 here, but if I highlight these and grab this corner and then drag them along, you can see that it knows that I'm trying to count by 1. Okay? And I could do something like count by a half from 3, so say 3.5, like that. And usually 2 numbers is enough, and you can see that it just counts up by a half. And I like to have my numbers nicely formatted, so rather than going from no decimal place to 1 decimal place to no decimal place, maybe I can use these add and subtract or delete decimal place buttons to add another decimal on there, and so I have a nicer looking row. You can do the same thing with columns, 1, 2, 3, and then just drag that down. Okay, so let me get rid of these rows. I'm just going to hit delete and answer yes to the questions there. And well, let's give this a heading. Let's call this index, for lack of a better word, and maybe I'll format this so that the word index is over the flush right to the column. Okay, so now let's do some interesting things. Let's put some formulas in. So let's call this column +1. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a formula into this cell. And what I want it to do is, so in order to start a formula, I use the equal sign. So now the spreadsheet knows that there's going to be a formula in here, and it's going to execute whatever commands I put in. And I'm going to say equal this number. So you can see when I selected that, it gave me B5. So this is what's in the cell, equal B5. And we'll just say +1. Okay? And so when I do that, it takes whatever's in this cell, adds 1, and I get 2 there. Now, if I want to do that to each cell in this row, or this column, I could do that. I could say equal that +1. And I get 2 + 1 is 3. But a better way to do that is to use that dragging feature. And now the spreadsheet knows that there's a formula in these cells, and so it's going to adjust the formula as I drag it along. Okay, and you can see that I've added 1 to every, this column is 1 greater than every number in this column. And if I double click on, say, this cell, you can see that what's in this cell is the cell to the left +1. And so that's what it's recognizing. I'm taking the cell to the left and adding 1. Take the cell to the left and add 1. And that's what it does. Okay, so let's do something more interesting. Let's take the square. So let's take index squared. So one simple way to do a square is just to take the number and multiply it by itself. So we'll say B5 times, the times is a star, times B5 again. So that gives me the square of B5. And 1 squared is 1. And then I'll go ahead and drag that formula down. And so now I've filled that same formula into each one of these boxes. This is B17 times B17. This is the number in B17, so it should be 13 squared, which is 169. Let's now take, well, let's keep keying off the index here, and let's say divide by 10. So we'll say this is equal to, whatever's in this cell is going to be equal to this number divided by 10. So 1 divided by 10 is 0.1, and I'll drag this down, and I get these decimal numbers, and I'm going to just add a decimal place on, and sometimes you have to fiddle with this, and you can add and subtract to get them to have the same number of decimal places. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do something more sophisticated. Spreadsheets have just hundreds of built-in functions, things that they know how to do. They're like a calculator. Every cell is like a little calculator. So let's say the natural log of index. So let's take the natural log of index. And I happen to know that the natural log function is just ln. It's a function in the spreadsheet, and it's followed by parentheses. And we put in our value, and it's giving us some hints here. So I want to take the log of the index. And so the log of 1 is 0, yep. And then I can take the log of all those. Okay. And maybe I'll clean this up a little bit and get rid of some of the decimals, maybe like that. Okay. All right, so that's just a quick and dirty introduction to what kinds of formulas we can put in cells. We're really unlimited. There's a whole, if we click on this little function wizard, which is available on any spreadsheet that I know of, you can get a whole list of functions. These are all the functions that the spreadsheet can calculate. There are just hundreds of them on there, okay? So we're not going to mess with that right now. But let's go through the steps of cleaning this up and making it into a nicely formatted table that we might want to put into a document. Okay. So the first thing I'll do is maybe I'll justify all these column headers here. And why don't I do something like highlight those in black. And you can see the spreadsheet has automatically shifted my heading color to white so that it didn't disappear on the black, which is kind of nice. But let's say I wanted to make it yellow. There's usually some sort of text formatting coloring tool that I can use. Let's say maybe I don't like how thin that is, so maybe I'll thicken that up a bit. And maybe I'll center the text vertically, and there's a little tool for that right up here. Maybe let's make these rows a little taller so that I don't have my numbers squashed up so much. So now I have a little more even spacing in this table. Maybe I want to delineate the end of the table by a line. So there's all kinds of borders that you can put on tables, and so I can put a line there. If I didn't like the thickness of this, I could go up and say format cells, and I could come in here and say borders, and I could come down here and say the bottom, maybe I'll make that 3-point border. So do that, and that thickens that up just a bit. And that's not such a bad looking table. Maybe I'll squeeze this in a little bit. I can change the column and, oops, not that one, this one. Column and column widths and row heights. And so that's not a bad looking table. Let's get an idea in the print preview of what that might look like. And there it is. And that's not so bad. Okay. So there's a lot of formatting you can do, like in any program that manipulates text and numbers, but okay, so those are some of the things we can do with formulas and dragging rows and columns around.